The world is in the grip of fuel crises, recession, and shifting car culture. And then, out of nowhere, a stainless steel wedge with gull-wing doors lands like a spaceship. The DeLorean DMC-12 wasn't just a car. It was a scandal, a dream, and a pop culture icon in one. Built in Northern Ireland, designed by a superstar, and remembered forever for a movie it almost didn't get. Tonight, we're peeling back the brushed metal and diving into 20 weird facts you didn't know about the 1981 DeLorean DMC-12. And trust me, wait until you hear why number 1 almost never made it to production. The DeLorean wasn't just a car, it was a cultural event, a one-year wonder that rewrote how people saw sports cars. Some saw it as futuristic genius, others as a stainless steel folly. But everyone had an opinion. Before we hit the countdown, tap that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and buckle in. Because this is a ride through scandals, secrets, and stainless steel. Gull-wing doors nearly didn't work. At first glance, those doors look like pure Hollywood magic. But here's the kicker. They were almost abandoned. John DeLorean wanted gull wings, but engineers warned about hinge complexity, roof strength, and parking lot practicality. Enter designer Giorgetto Giugiaro and structural guru Bill Collins. The compromise? A lightweight fiberglass underbody with a narrow roof box strong enough to mount the hinges. Gas struts had to be tuned endlessly. Too weak, the doors wouldn't lift. Too strong, they'd warp. Even today, owners replace struts like tires. Spotter's tip? Real early cars sometimes sag mid-lift. And if you think gull wings were tricky, wait till you hear what powered, or underpowered, this machine. Under the hood, a French-Swedish engine. The twist? A car hyped as American ingenuity didn't have an American heart. Instead, the DeLorean ran the PRV V6, a joint project by Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo. At 2.85 liters and around 130 horsepower, it was hardly supercar material. Why? Because DeLorean's dream of a rotary Wankel and later a turbo V8 fell apart under cost and emissions rules. In Europe, the PRV made sense. In the US, Car and Driver called it sluggish, with 0 to 60 in over 10 seconds. Collectors know the sound instantly, a throaty growl, but not a roar. And if you think the engine was odd, wait until you hear about the body. Stainless steel was a nightmare. Even more shocking, nobody in mass-market auto history had attempted unpainted stainless steel panels. John DeLorean thought it would be futuristic, rust-proof, and maintenance-free. In reality, every fingerprint showed. Every dent was permanent. Dealers had to keep Scotch-Brite pads on hand to brush out scratches. Some owners even had panels replaced rather than repaired. Fun fact, the panels were made by Lotus subcontractors and bolted onto a fiberglass underbody. Spotter's tip. True stainless cars have a slightly different sheen than aftermarket painted ones. And that's not all. The weight of those panels made the car heavier than promised. Lotus DNA everywhere. Here's the kicker. Underneath that sci-fi skin, the DMC-12 was basically a Lotus Esprit in disguise. Colin Chapman of Lotus re-engineered the entire chassis when DeLorean's in-house team faltered. The double Y frame, fiberglass underbody, even suspension geometry, straight out of Lotus playbooks. Why? Because Lotus knew how to build lightweight sports cars fast and cheap. That DNA made the DeLorean handle surprisingly well, despite its lack of raw power. Collectors often point out the Lotus parts bin details, switches, relays, even suspension bushings. And if you think Lotus saved the car once, wait until you hear how the factory nearly doomed it. Built in Northern Ireland, for political reasons. The part nobody talks about? The DeLorean wasn't built in Detroit. It was built in Dunmurry, Northern Ireland. Why? Because the British government poured in over $100 million in subsidies, hoping the factory would bring peace and jobs during the Troubles. Instead, it became a political football. Reports of unfinished cars, strikes, and inconsistent quality haunted the plant. Workers, many with no auto experience, learned on the job. Spotter's tip: early VIN cars often show rough panel gaps compared to later ones. And that's when things get weird. Because those subsidies tied DeLorean to politics, he couldn't escape. The sliding window oddity. Why did the DeLorean have those tiny, awkward sliding windows instead of full roll-down glass? The twist? It wasn't just a design quirk. It was necessity. Gull-wing doors made it nearly impossible to fit conventional roll-down windows. Engineers tried multiple solutions, including a clumsy split-window prototype, before settling on a fixed pane with a small sliding insert. The result? Drivers could barely fit a fast food bag through. Owners joke it's the world's most expensive drive-through nightmare. Spotter's tip: original windows have a distinct rectangular slider. Aftermarket versions sometimes enlarge them. And if you think that's inconvenient, wait until you hear about the factory's quality control. 7. Quality control, or lack of it. Even more shocking, some early DeLoreans left the factory unfinished. Reports exist of cars missing trim, misaligned panels, or with electrical gremlins baked in. Why? Because DeLorean was desperate to ship vehicles to meet investor expectations. Dealers often finished assembly work themselves. In fact, the quality assurance centers in Michigan and California essentially became second factories, fixing dozens of issues before delivery. Collectors know, later VINs generally show much tighter panel fit and fewer electrical flaws. And that's not all. This quality rush left behind a treasure trove of oddball early builds. Gold-plated DeLoreans. Here's the kicker. 24 DeLoreans were literally plated in 24-karat gold. Commissioned by American Express in 1980 as a gimmick for its gold card catalog, each car was priced at $85,000, more than double a standard DMC-12. Fewer than 10 were completed, and only a handful survive untouched today. The process required electroplating stainless steel panels, an insanely expensive and delicate task. Spotter's tip: if you ever see one at auction, you're looking at one of the rarest oddities in car history. And if gold wasn't flashy enough, wait until you hear about the factory paint cars. Painted DeLoreans exist. The myth says all DeLoreans were stainless. The reality? Roughly 24 were painted at the factory, black, red, even blue. Why? Because dealers begged for variety, and some buyers didn't want to fuss with fingerprints. Today, factory-painted DeLoreans are incredibly rare and valuable, though many stainless cars were later painted by owners. How to spot a true original? Factory paint shows underhood and inside the gull-wing jams, while aftermarket jobs often stop short. And if you think color was rare, wait until you hear about the car that almost wore a police badge. DeLorean police car prototypes. Believe it or not, several prototype DeLoreans were pitched as police cars, complete with sirens, light bars, and black and white liveries. The idea? A futuristic patrol fleet to grab headlines. Photos from the early 80s show these oddities, though none entered active duty. Allegedly, U.S. departments dismissed them as too underpowered for pursuit. Collectors love spotting these photos. Some restorers have even recreated the look for car shows. Spotter's tip: if you see a DeLorean with roof mount holes or odd wiring under the dash, it might trace back to one of those prototypes. And if police cars sound wild, wait until you hear about John DeLorean's personal schemes. John DeLorean's drug sting. Here's the kicker. John DeLorean himself nearly took down the car. In 1982, he was arrested in an FBI sting, accused of trafficking cocaine to raise money for the struggling company. The twist? He was later acquitted after proving entrapment, but the scandal destroyed investor confidence. The timing was brutal, right as the company was on financial life support. Newspapers splashed his mugshot across front pages, and the DeLorean name became synonymous with scandal. Collectors note that post-arrest cars with high VIN numbers are rare survivors from those final chaotic months. Spotter's tip: look for 1982 build dates. They carry a certain last gasp mystique. And if the CEO scandal sounds crazy, wait until you hear what the movie industry did with this stainless wedge. Back to the Future saved it. The DeLorean might have been a forgotten oddity until Hollywood stepped in. Director Robert Zemeckis and producer Bob Gale chose it as Doc Brown's time machine in Back to the Future, 1985. Why? The gull-wing doors and sci-fi look screamed spaceship. The car became immortalized in pop culture, selling posters, toys, and nostalgia by the millions. Ironically, by the film's release, the company was already bankrupt. Collectors know movie-used cars, especially hero cars, fetch astronomical prices. Spotter's tip: screen-used props often have wild wiring, false gauges, or fiberglass replicas of parts. And that's not all, because the movie magic made the car's flaws vanish, rewriting history forever. But Hollywood wasn't the only arena. DeLorean nearly made its mark on racing too. The racing that never was. The twist? John DeLorean originally hoped the DMC-12 could compete in Group B rallying or sports car racing. Early promotional sketches even teased competition liveries. But the underpowered PRV-V6 and fragile financials killed the dream. Lotus engineers knew it wasn't race-ready, and investors balked at the costs. Yet, in the 1980s, a handful of enthusiasts tried converting DeLoreans for racing, with mixed results. Rumor has it, one track-tuned DMC reached nearly 150 miles per hour, but durability failed quickly. Collectors today sometimes build tribute race cars, complete with roll cages and wild liveries. Spotter's tip: if you find drilled body panels or aftermarket harness mounts, it may have belonged to one of these rare wannabe racers. And if racing fizzled, the engineering quirks still turned heads. 14. Odd speedometer limitation. Here's the kicker. The DeLorean's US speedometer only read up to 85 miles per hour. Why? Federal law at the time mandated capped speedometers to discourage reckless driving. The irony? The car itself could reach 110 miles per hour. Owners hated it, hitting the peg long before the engine tapped out. Export models kept higher readouts, making them prized among collectors. Spotter's tip: if you're buying a DeLorean today, check the cluster. 85 mile per hour units dominate. But rare export cars with 140 mile per hour gauges are coveted. And the weirdest part? After the law changed in 1982, the DeLorean was already gone, forever stuck with an artificial ceiling. But if you thought the speedometer was frustrating, wait until you hear about the car's bizarre gas cap location. 15. Hidden gas cap trick. The part nobody talks about. The DeLorean's fuel filler is hidden under the front hood. Early prototypes had a neat flap on the hood itself, but production cars lost it to save costs. Result? Owners had to lift the entire hood just to refuel, making gas station stops awkward and slow. Allegedly, dealers complained about the inconvenience, but it was too late. A handful of early pre-production cars with the flap survive, and they're collector gold. Spotter's tip: if you find a DeLorean with a hood fuel flap, it's either an early prototype or an aftermarket modification mimicking the original design. And that's when things get weird, because convenience wasn't exactly the car's strong suit. But the next fact? It's about survival. 16. Survival rate is shockingly high. Here's the kicker. Despite the company collapsing in 1982, an estimated 6,000 of the original 9,000 DeLoreans still survive today. That's an unusually high rate for a 40-year-old niche car. Why? Stainless steel bodies resisted rust, and passionate owners hoarded parts. After the bankruptcy, warehouses full of spares were bought up by enthusiasts, fueling a cottage industry of restorers. Clubs and fan networks kept the legend alive, swapping Scotch-Brite tips as often as engine parts. Spotter's tip: check for VIN plates. Cars in the 10,000 range are ultra-rare late builds, prized among collectors. Even more shocking? Some of these survivors have fewer than 1,000 miles on them, preserved like time capsules. And if survival is remarkable, the company's resurrection plans are even crazier. 17. The electric DeLorean that almost happened. Even more shocking, in the late 1990s and 2000s, DeLorean Motor Company of Texas, which owns leftover parts, stock and rights, toyed with making an electric DeLorean. Prototypes were shown at auto shows, boasting futuristic batteries and silent gull-wing doors. The idea was to revive the legend for a new century, but high costs, limited range, and niche demand meant the project stalled. Rumor has it Tesla even considered partnering in the early days, but nothing came of it. Spotter's tip: if you see a DeLorean with e-badging and modern gauges, it's one of these rare electric conversions. And here's the twist. This wasn't the only revival, because new builds of the original car are still rumored today. 18. DeLoreans in pop culture beyond. Back to the Future. The twist? The car wasn't just a Hollywood one-hit wonder. DeLoreans popped up in Ready Player One, music videos, video games like Grand Theft Auto, and even obscure TV commercials. Each time, the stainless wedge was shorthand for futuristic cool. Some musicians even bought DeLoreans as ironic stage props. Collectors know. Screen exposure often bumps auction prices, and movie-used props are tracked obsessively. Spotter's tip: check the rear louvers. Production replicas for film often had fiberglass replacements that look close, but lack the stainless texture. And that's not all, because cultural fame saved the car's image, even as the company itself rotted. But pop culture didn't just preserve the DeLorean, it cemented a strange, eternal afterlife. 19. The rumored twin-turbo prototype. Here's the kicker. Legend has it that 2 DeLorean prototypes were fitted with twin-turbo kits by Legend Industries in New York. These cars supposedly made over 200 horsepower, finally delivering the performance the wedge-shaped body promised. Some claim DeLorean planned to sell them as a high-performance trim in 1983. The twist? The company collapsed before it could happen. Photos exist of test cars, but production records remain murky, making them one of the great DeLorean mysteries. Spotter's tip: any DMC with aftermarket turbo plumbing should be inspected carefully. True legend cars have unique manifolds and serial documentation. Even more shocking? If those turbos had gone mainstream, the car might have rewritten sports car history, but nothing tops the number one fact. 20. The car almost didn't exist at all. Here's the final twist. The DeLorean DMC-12 nearly never made it past the drawing board. In 1979, before the first production line opened, funding collapsed. Banks refused loans, and investors backed out. John DeLorean begged governments and private backers, pitching the car as futuristic salvation. Without the British government's $100+ million bailout for the Northern Ireland factory, the dream would have died. The irony? That same bailout tied him to political storms, quality chaos, and eventual ruin. The car that became immortal in Back to the Future was inches from being cancelled before a single panel was stamped. Spotter's tip: early prototype Vine cars, hand-assembled before Dunmurray launched, are holy grails among collectors. The kicker? A ghost of a car became eternal. The 1981 DeLorean DMC-12 was a paradox. A car too slow to be a sports car, too strange to be mainstream, yet too unforgettable to die. It was stainless steel bravado bolted onto lotus bones, haunted by scandal, saved by cinema, and preserved by obsession. Myths swirl around it: turbo prototypes, police cars, gold-plated oddities. But the reality is just as wild: a flawed machine that became timeless. Which fact blew your mind? The gold-plated models, the twin-turbo rumors, or that bizarre gas cap trick? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. And if you loved this countdown, check out our other deep dives into cars that rewrote history in ways nobody expected. Because the DeLorean wasn't just a car, it was destiny wrapped in stainless steel.